How no one called this woman out on this show, I'll never know. Probably one of the most disrespectful comments I think I've heard. Nothing more than I'd expect, however, from these anti-British hate-filled activists. The debate was over whether there should be more laws regarding the pro-Palestine protests. And as usual, it got heated. But for this woman to say protesters climbing over our war memorials is no big deal because they are just a block of cement is outrageous, even for her. I mean, what do you say to that kind of disrespect? If hearing that doesn't leave you with no doubt just to how much these people hate Britain and everything about it, then I don't know what will. War memorials are pretty much some of our most holy places. Go to any village or town and you will see countless names on memorials of all the people from that village who have died in war. They are almost essential to the village as the local church. That is what they mean to the people of this country. To refer to a monument that is there to remember all those who died in the world wars as a bit of cement is just beyond offensive to this nation. What she really means is it is just a bit of cement because it symbolises something she hates. It's a tribute to all those brave people who died defending something she utterly hates. Would she refer to statues that commemorate slaves or the civil rights movement as a block of cement? Of course not. When she was celebrating the tearing down of statues, she wasn't referring to them as a block of bronze or cement, then was she? If that's all they are, then why behave like a bunch of frenzied maniacs going to all the effort to pull them down? Why they get these haters on and give them so much airtime, I'll never know. It's time now we stood up and said no. This is Britain and British culture and customs reign supreme. And we'll build statues and monuments in line with that. If you don't like it, go live in a country you do like. Obviously, pro-Palestine protesters climbing on our monuments is a big deal that shouldn't be tolerated. Just as it is what monuments symbolise what really matters, climbing on monuments symbolises no respect for this country, its people, or its history. Just take a watch of this. Unfortunately, her opponent wasn't much good either.
Of course, it's overreach by the government. Let's just be fair. I think they have to get their priorities in order, right? So right now we seem to be focusing on protests. We seem to be focusing on marches. We seem to be focusing on masks, pyrotechnics, and reality is there are far more pressing issues at hand. And this is the issue.
Of those issues, which ones do you have specific problems with?
14 million people in poverty.
No, sorry, not the issues. The issues that the government are saying they want to legislate. That may be a very.
Give you a list.
That's fine. We could do a completely side debate on that. But I just want to pick apart your thoughts on these specific proposals. Yeah. Which ones do you have a specific problem with and why?
Okay, so I think the main thing for me, it comes down to pyrotechnics. I just think is a complete waste of time. It's kind of a generic thing that is a part of protest. That's an issue for me. Of course, it comes down to standing on war memorials. This is a big thing, and I think this is where the contention lies because this has been happening for decades.
Why should
and
you
yet,
stand
all
on
of
a
a
war
sudden,
memorial, though? That's disrespectful, isn't it?
But there are loads of things that are disrespectful. I personally think what's disrespectful, again, not to go on a tangent, but we have to stick on the topic. What's disrespectful is prioritising protests over homelessness, prioritising protests over the NHS, prioritising protests over poverty. Meanwhile, people are literally ripping out their teeth, their own teeth, because they can't get a dentist appointment, whilst the government focuses on masks, pyrotechnics, and standing on cement. This is why I have an issue, and this is why originally, sir, I spoke about priorities, because the priorities are all wrong.
I mean, we were speaking, this debate, we'd like to talk about what the government wants to do in terms of protesting. We had a big debate yesterday about their plans when it comes to dentistry. In principle, the argument some people make is, you know, you shouldn't be able to stand on a war memorial, and therefore the police don't need additional powers to try and combat that.
But that area has already been covered. And I think we need to make a distinction between criminal damage and standing, making a call for a ceasefire, right? There's a complete difference. And so it's only just started. This conversation about standing on war memorials has only just started. I really would like to point out, I remember Andrew Banks in 2020 when I did my protest. Andrew Banks was a gentleman who came down to protect the statues in 2020 against BLM, against black people like me. And then he ended up urinating on a memorial for a policeman who was stabbed to death. So this is what I have an issue with. We can talk about standing on memorials and that person potentially gets 3 years in prison and a £1,000 fine. But Andrew Banks, he got 14 days in jail. So basically, currently, right now, under the priorities of this government, if you urinate on a memorial or anywhere near a statue or a monument, you get 14 days in jail. If you stand on it, though, and talk about ceasefire.
Well, actually, that's very good. Let me bring in Benedict here because he's been grimacing through a lot of what you've been saying. Benedict, do we need more laws in this area?
I think if you have a high-trust society, that involves people actually trusting each other not to misbehave, and once people transgress against that, actually, yes, you do. I don't think it's actually to do with respect. I think it's to do with provocation. Actually, what we had last time...
What's wrong with a bit of provocation?
Well, because what we had last time where there was this, the suggestion that people might be trespassing on war memorials was that thousands of people turned up and very angrily started attacking the police. So actually, I think if that is a problem,
then I think... That's a sweeping statement. You just said thousands.
Well,
have you got facts to back that up, sir?
Did thousands of football fans not march on the cenotaph and start attacking the police? I'm pretty certain that they did.
People did not attack
yes,
the police.
They absolutely did. That was the way. That was the way. Certainly, that's the way that it was. Certainly, that was the way that it was portrayed. I certainly saw thousands. That's what the police said, was that thousands of people, predominantly football fans, turned up and marched to the cenotaph, and there was the potential for violence.
And you can argue whether or not they were football fans either. But the point is, let's get back to your point, was that it was provocative for this to happen, and that's what caused a reaction.
Yes, and this is the same actually when it comes down to pyrotechnics. What are pyrotechnics on a march often used for? They are used to launch at the police. They're not allowed at football stadiums for a very specific reason, because they are used as projectiles. That's why they're not used at... That's why they're banned
at what point have you ever seen them launched at police? Please give me a day. So give us a day.
Missiles are regularly thrown at police during protests.
So give us a day in terms of a pyrotechnic.
the last football match I attended in Italy, I saw them being used.
Isn't that funny?
The last football match I attended in Italy, I saw them being launched at police.
So now you're talking about Italy, a complete different country, and now you're talking about football. We're actually talking about
protests. I can give you examples.
To a time where you saw pyrotechnics being literally aimed at police during a protest. Please.
Iman, if you would like me to go into the long and storied history of football protests in Italy being used against the police, we can. It's not no answer at all, and what you're just doing is going, I'm going to pull lots of different examples out of the air.
Question, Benedict. The police already have the power to ask individuals to remove face coverings in a specific area where they think a crime could be committed. Why, in your mind, is that not sufficient?
Simply because I don't think that what the police often have been doing at a lot of these marches is saying, well, we don't arrest people, for example, chanting anti-Semitic slogans, etc. We like to stand back and we like to wait and we like to observe. If actually you then have to wait and observe and you look at the footage of a march and say, oh, actually, we can't tell who's actually doing the chanting because their faces are covered, I think actually that's not an unfair thing to say, right, well, if this is what's going to be happening at marches...
This is not sweeping statements. Have you been onto it? Have you been to
I tell you what, for somebody who's offering a lot of sweeping statements, guys, I'm hearing a lot of sweeping statements. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Iman,
this is all we seem to get.
Because you actually are wrong. That's all.
Iman,
I do apologise.
Where do you stand on the face covering issue?
See, it's interesting because for me, it comes down to two things. The hypocrisy of the fact that we spent many years, at least two, from the police and this government talking about, you must wear a face covering. In fact, we're going to arrest you. Obviously, during COVID, you don't remember that time where you were literally going to be arrested for not having a mask? Yeah. And now we've transitioned to masks. So that's interesting. But for me personally, it comes down to policing. Better policing, which makes their lives easier. So if you wear a mask, it does make policing easier. That is something I will always subscribe to. And then secondly, in terms of safety, I've been on these protests and I understand how uncomfortable it may be, how uncomfortable people may feel being surrounded by people that are masked up, because you could theft, burglary, etc., all different types of
But hang on, isn't masking up a risk?
It is a sweeping statement.
Can I ask this question, Iman? Iman, can I ask this question of you? Isn't masking up a response to surveillance? People don't want to be surveilled when they're going about their lawful right to protest.
Of course, and I will be balanced in saying there are a proportion of people, just like we said, that cohort, that small cohort, not the thousands of people that protest, but there is a small cohort that come to protest to basically wreak havoc. That is the reality of it. And those people tend to, not always, tend to wear masks. So some people wear masks because they don't want to be harassed by police in terms of racism, in terms of prejudice, in terms of just out and out being nasty and having police being nasty. And there are a small proportion.
The policy, which then makes it so political and clearly, as we've seen evidence in the studio, highly controversial. Thank you both so much for coming on.